Hello students, UPSC Mains 2026 is underway and today we are going to take up a detailed discussion of the social justice questions asked in GS paper 2. In this session, we will not merely discuss the questions and their model answers, but we will also try to understand the underlying themes, concepts, constitutional provisions, important judgments, government policies, and evolving dimensions that UPSC is testing through these questions. Before we move to social justice, let us briefly look at the overall composition of GS paper 2. This year, the paper had 8 questions from Indian Constitution and Polity, 4 questions from governance, 4 questions from social justice, and 4 questions from international relations. In terms of marks, Constitution and Polity carried the highest weightage with 100 marks, followed by governance with 55 marks, and international relations with 50 marks, and social justice with 45 marks. But students, marks alone do not tell the complete story. What is particularly important is the nature of the social justice questions. UPSC is increasingly moving beyond straightforward questions on schemes and programs, and it is testing our ability to connect constitutional values, social equity, human development, vulnerable sections, and governance outcomes. Therefore, in today's session, we will first understand what exactly UPSC asked. Then we will try to develop the model approach to each question. And finally, we will also analyze the emerging trends of social justice questions and how you should prepare for Mains 2027 and beyond. So let's begin the discussion. So like I told you that this year, these are the total questions. For example, here the questions have been displayed. So when you are watching the video, you must have question paper PDF with you. So here there are 20 questions from Indian GS paper 2. Total number of questions are 20. Now, out of these questions, today we are going to discuss social justice question. But like I told you that there were total 8 questions from Indian Constitution and Polity section. Now, the theme of the questions that were asked in, for example, question number 2, question number 3, question number 4, question number 5, question number 11, 12, 13 and 14. These are questions from Indian Constitution and Polity. Now, when we move ahead, we see the questions from governance. So there are 4 questions and these questions are from governance. These questions are question number 8, question number 15, question number 16 and question number 17. Now we are moving to the questions from social justice. So there were 4 questions. That is question number 1, question number 6, question number 7 and question number 18. So these are total 4 questions. So in today's class, we are going to discuss the detailed analysis of these 4 questions along with the model answers of these questions. And from international relations, you will see that again 4 questions are asked, and these questions are question number 9, question number 10, question number 19 and question number 20. These are 4 questions from international relations. Now, here it means that it is clear that from Indian Constitution and Polity, the total number of questions is 8. From governance, the total number of questions is 4. From social justice, the total number of questions is 4. From international relations, the total number of questions is 4. And overall total number of questions is 20. So here, Indian Constitution and Polity, again you can mark on your paper that question number 2, 3, 4, 5 and question number 11, 12, 13, 14. These are Indian Constitution and Polity questions. Governance, question number 8 and question number 15, 16, 17. Social justice, question number 1, question number 6, 7 and question number 18 that we are going to discuss today. And IR question number 9, 10 and question number 19, 20. So these are questions. Now let's look at the marks distribution. So you will find that There were total 8 questions from Indian Constitution and Polity. So 4 questions were 10 marker and 4 questions were 15 markers. So in this way, 4 10 marker question is equal to 40 mark and 4 15 marker question is equal to 60 marks. So overall, we see here that Indian Constitution and Polity, it carries total 100 marks, and governance, there is one question of 10 marks, that is 10 marker question, and there are 3 questions that are 15 marker question in governance section. So here you will see that the total marks that governance part is carrying, that is 55 marks, 45 plus 10. In social justice, there are 3 questions which are 10 marker question, so 30 marks, and one question is 15 marker. So the total marks that social justice part is carrying, that is 45, that we are going to discuss in today's lecture. And IR, international relations, there are 2 10 marker question and there are 2 15 marker question. In this way, 20 plus 30 is equal to 50 marks. So the total marks is 250, right? And 10 15 marker question and 10 10 marker question. So this is the distribution of marks in your paper. So basically we have to discuss today Indian society and social justice questions. So we are going to start our discussion with the social justice question. So this is the social justice. The 4 questions are question number 1, question number 6, question number 7 and question number 18. Now question number 1 is 10 marker. Question number 6 is also 10 marker. It means that we have to write the answer of these questions in 150 word. Question number 7 is also 10 marker. We have to write the answer in 150 word. But question number 18 is 15 marker. It means that here we have to write the answer of this question in 250 words. Now what are the questions? Let's identify the theme here from social justice. So question number 1 is related to the theme right to privacy and transgender rights. Question number 6 is related to this theme, that is tribal development and equity. Question number 7 is related to the theme malnutrition and social equity. And question number 18 is related to the theme education, welfare versus strategic investment. Now we have identified the theme. Now question number 1 says that, it asks that right to privacy relating to self-identity is very dear to every human being and well protected under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. In this context, examine the effect of the amendment in 2026 to the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. And question number 6 asking that, does India's tribal development policy reflect the aspirations of a socially grounded and equity-based governance? Justify your answer. Question number 7 is asking that malnutrition in India is not merely a public health concern, it is also a challenge of social equity, human development and effective welfare governance. Discuss. Question number 18 is saying that, it is asking that, should education be treated primarily as a welfare obligation of the state or it should be treated as a strategic investment for building a globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation? Critically evaluate. So these are 4 questions. Now in GS paper 2, you must mark these 4 questions. You must highlight that these 4 questions are from social justice part. Now we are going to have a detailed discussion of very first question, that is a 10 marker question, and we have to write the answer of this question in 150 words. The question, the theme is related to right to privacy and transgender rights. This is the broader theme that has been asked in the question. Now what this question is asking, so this question is asking that, again, while reading questions, you will have to be very cautious. And what I will do here while discussing the answer of this question, first I will do a very detailed analysis. First I will do a very detailed analysis of the themes that have been asked in this question. And why I will do that? Because if this theme will be repeated again in exam, and there are greater chances of repetition, because this is not you can say that the theme right to privacy is related to various dimensions. Okay, so there are chances that the keywords which I will discuss while discussing the answer, the concepts that I will discuss, okay, different parts of the answer that I will discuss will might be useful for you in the different stages of examination in future also. So that's why we will do a very detailed analysis, and then I will discuss the model answer of these questions, so that you should not find it difficult to write the answer. That will also develop your approach. So we will do both these two things. So first, we should read the questions very carefully. For example, first we should identify the directive keywords that I have already told you. So here the directive keyword is examine. Okay, and whenever we are examining anything, any statement, any proposition, I have already told you that examining simply means that we have to do a balanced assessment of what has been asked here. Balanced assessment means exploring all dimensions. Okay, so that we have to do balanced assessment and we have to explore all dimensions. Now, when you will highlight the other keywords in this question, you will find that one keyword is right to privacy. You all are familiar with the right of privacy, and here it is saying that right to privacy related to self-identity. Right to privacy related to self-identity, right, is very dear to every human being and well protected under Article 21 of the Constitution. It means that from Polity and Constitution, Article 21, right? Now, Article 21 is closely related to this right to privacy, related to self-identity, and in this context, examine the effect. Here again, this is a keyword, effect of the amendment in 2026. Amendment where? So amendment to Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, yani TPPRA 2019, Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. So now looking at the question, now we can easily identify that here the question is talking about self-identity. It means that when we say the question here is talking about self-identity, so what is the meaning of self-identity? That is a very important point. So self-identity means an individual's ability to determine and express one's gender identity, because now we have identified that the broader theme is related to transgenders. So here the self-identity is indicating to an individual's ability to determine and express one's gender identity. Plus the question is related to transgender rights. Okay, so this is the theme. Here we have to know about transgender rights. We already have studied in social justice transgender rights. This is a very important topic. Okay, and whenever in our classes, wherever you have studied in modules, you must have read about transgender rights. Okay, so we should be familiar with the basic, very basic concept and understanding about transgender rights. For example, what is the legal recognition of transgender rights? We must know. We must know about non-discrimination and discrimination concept with transgenders, the dignity of an individual, dignity of transgenders, equal access of transgenders to welfare and public institutions. And here the question is also indicating to 2026 amendment, and it is simply asking about, it means that we should be familiar with Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, but here it is asking that, okay, the question is asking that what is the effect of the amendment in 2026. So there is no need to write your complete answer. It means that you don't need to write Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2019. No, here we see that the nature of questions are evolving. Now UPSC is not only asking to you that you have to write about programs and policies, but here what we see that programs and policies and the interaction of these programs and policies with different dimensions have been interlinked. Here you must know about Article 21. Here you must know about right to privacy. Here you must know about bodily autonomy. Here you must know about gender self-identification, right? You must know about 2026 amendment. If there is some controversy, or if there is some constitutional debate, or if the amendment is debate comes in debate in editorials and newspapers, so you must be familiar with all these developments. Now, there are some hidden demands of this question. For example, whenever you will discuss transgender rights in your general studies classes, you must have read about case Puttaswamy versus Union of India case 2017, right? So you must know, okay? You must know about Article 21. You must know about NALSA judgment 2014, NALSA judgment versus Union of India, and then by just relating with different rights given in the constitution, you can talk about the amendment. Plus, it has been a matter of debate also, so that debatable part should be also be the part of your answer. So our first target is to discuss each and everything in detail. So obviously, while discussing or while approaching the answer of this question, we must know a few more things. For example, we must know about the KS Puttaswamy versus Union of KS Puttaswamy versus Union of India case. It is very much important to know about this case. So what are the most important, you can say, takeaway from this case? So in this case, Supreme Court recognized privacy as a fundamental right under Article 21. It means that here what is happening? Supreme Court has recognized privacy as a fundamental right under Article 21. This is the most important point, that Supreme Court has recognized privacy, okay? And it has recognized privacy under Article 21 and is linked with the dignity, autonomy and personal choice. This is the most important point, that privacy has also been linked with, it has been linked with dignity, autonomy and personal choice. Privacy has been linked with dignity, autonomy and personal choice. These basic concepts we must know. So this will be helpful for writing answers, okay? It will be helpful in using it in essay also, okay? So it is linked with dignity, it is linked with autonomy and personal choice, right? So here the Supreme Court anonymously held that right to privacy is a fundamental right, and the Supreme Court says that the right to privacy is protected under Article 21. You all know about Article 21. That is related to right to life and personal liberty. You all know about this. And other fundamental rights given in Part 3. So the court said that privacy is essential for dignity of an individual. It is essential for autonomy of an individual, and it is also essential for personal choices and individual liberty of an individual. So if there is any restriction on privacy, so if the state puts any restriction on privacy, so if there is any restriction on privacy, if there is any restriction on privacy, so that restriction should satisfy the legality of that restriction, necessity of that restriction, proportionality of that restriction, and the legitimate state aim behind this restriction. So this has been discussed in this case, and this is related to, and this case is related to the gender identity also, right? Because the decisions concerning one's body, one's identity and our intimate life, this falls within the sphere of our personal autonomy. And then there is another judgment, that is NALSA Judgment 2014. This is also an important fact and information. NALSA Judgment 2014. When we say NALSA judgment, NALSA you all know, National Legal Services Authority Act. So in NALSA judgment versus Union of India 2014, what we see? So this judgment is concerning the rights and recognition of transgender persons. So this is related to, or it is concerning the rights, and it is concerning about the rights and recognition of transgender persons. It is concerning about the rights and recognition of transgender persons. About transgender persons, rights and recognition. And here the Supreme Court legally recognized transgender persons as third gender. That is a very important point. That Supreme Court has legally recognized transgender persons as third gender. Supreme Court has legally recognized transgender persons as third gender. This is the point. And Supreme Court has affirmed their fundamental rights. It means that fundamental rights of transgenders and right to self-identify their gender. So here the word self-identify is very much important. And the Supreme Court also directed governments to provide affirmative action, to provide education, to provide healthcare facilities, to provide social welfare for transgender persons. It means that here again what we see that it is linked with gender identity. It has linked gender identity with dignity, with equality and personal liberty under articles 14, 15, 16, 19 and 21. So when we see this judgment, you will find that here it is related to articles 14, 15, 16, 19 and 21. This is a very important point. So this was a landmark judgment. When we talk about gender justice, equality, dignity, inclusive governance, so that is an important point. And now there is another act, that is Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. This is the third act, Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. This is the third act. And here what we see, that this act, this law is made by the parliament to protect transgender persons from any kind of discrimination. This law has been passed by parliament to protect transgender persons from any kind of exploitation, and it provides protection to transgenders in areas like education, employment, healthcare, housing and access to public services. It means that it gives transgender persons legal protection against discrimination, and it also ensures equal access to basic rights and services. Now the question is, what has changed through 2026 amendment? This is the main, you can say, part of the question, that what has changed due to this amendment in 2026. It means that in question itself, it has been given Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, but amendment in 2026. That is an important part of question. What is the amendment? So you must be familiar about the amendment in 2026. Amendment in 2026, and this amendment was debatable. And since it was debatable, so it was the part of newspaper editorial analysis. So it is also a part of current affairs. Okay. So 2026 amendment significantly changes the legal framework. Okay. And what is the legal framework? Okay. What are the changes that has been introduced by 2026 amendment? Okay. So the changes that were introduced here by 2026 amendment, where what are the important changes that were introduced by amendment in 2026? So the first most important change is narrower statutory definition, right? So this is the most important change, narrower statutory statutory definition. Narrower statutory definition. Now, what is this narrower statutory definition? It simply means that earlier the law had a broader definition of a transgender person, right? Previously, the law had a broader definition. Here, I have written narrower statutory definition. It means that previously, the transgender person's definition was broader, but now it is narrower. So why it is narrower, right? That is the point here. So here, the new definition says that the new definition talks about listing specific categories of people who can be legally recognized as transgender. First important point, listing specific categories of people who can be legally recognized as transgender. The second most important point here is that it also does not include people solely on the basis of their own self-perceived sexual or gender identity. It means that self-certification now is not accepted. So that is why we are saying that it also does not include people solely on the basis of their own self-perceived sexual or gender identity. And this is the reason that critics argue that what has been done by this amendment, so this amendment has reduced the rights of individual to decide and identify their own gender, which was previously recognized in the NALSA Judgment 2014. In NALSA Judgment 2014, what happened? So self-certification, it means that, okay, previously, for example, previously, what was the situation? So previously, according to the NALSA Judgment 2014, a transgender could identify himself or herself as a transgender. It means that I identify myself as a transgender. This was the position in 2014 NALSA Judgment. But due to this 2026 amendment, now the situation has changed. It means that I must fit into legally specified categories to be recognized as transgender. That is the main difference. Previously, one could identify himself or herself as a transgender. Now, 2026 amendment onwards, one must fit into legally specified categories to be recognized as transgender. So how you can be fit into the legally specified categories? Obviously, there will be an involvement of a medical board. It means that now self-certification is not accepted. Now there is involvement of a medical board after 2026 amendment. Previously, gender identity was mainly based on the person's own declaration. Now a medical board will decide. Now a medical board has a role in the certification process. This means that a person may need institutional verification. A person may need medical verification to get official recognition as transgender. So here what do we see? We see that the process has shifted from I decide and identify my gender to an authority who will help to determine or verify your legal recognition. So in this way, we can say that after 2026 amendment, this amendment gives institutions a bigger role in recognizing a person's transgender identity and reducing the emphasis on self-identification. Okay, so this is what narrowing down the definition. And second, the medical board. Now this is compulsory medical board approval. Okay, medical board will certify that you are transgender or not. And the third important issue is documentation after this 2026 amendment. And what do you mean by documentation? For example, suppose you are a transgender person, right? And you want to get official identity certificate for a transgender. Okay, and once you will get this certificate, then you can request for a change in your first name or documents, birth certificate, other government records, right? It means that official documents will match the recognized identity after this documentation. Previously, officially, transgender identifies certificate. Now you can legally change your first name in important documents. This is the point here, right? It means that for documentation, you will have to follow these processes, right? So once your official identity certificate or official identity is confirmed, you get a certificate, then in documentation you can change your names. And there is also, you can say, some other provisions, like there are a stronger protection against coercion. Okay, this is an important point, that this 2020 into the accord 2026 amendment, we see what? A stronger protection against coercion or use of force. It means that this amendment makes kidnapping, seriously hurting, or forcing someone to adopt a transgender identity a more serious offense. It means that people who are forced, or the people who force someone, or the people who exploit someone, can face a stronger punishment. This is a good thing. And the objective is to provide greater protection against abuse and coercion. So here what we see, that this amendment strengthens the law against people who force, harm, or exploit others in matters of gendered identity. This is what amendment. Now, this amendment can be viewed positively also in some respects, and this amendment has also raised some concerns, and this is what critical analysis, that 2026 amendment, okay, there are some positive aspects, or you can say that you can look at these amendments positively also, and these amendments also raise some concerns. They also raise some concerns, and that's why I told you that this was a debatable topic. First, what are the positive dimensions here? Okay, so we can say that protection from coercion and exploitation. Okay, this strengthens the status of a transgender person, so this is positive. Stronger criminal penalties for the serious offenses against transgenders. This is also positive. Greater clarity regarding institutional responsibilities. For example, here the statutory definition has been changed. Medical board approval is important. Documentation. It means that this shows what? These steps show that here what we are doing, we are bringing greater clarity regarding institutional responsibility, right? And ultimately what will happen, this will also improve the documentation mechanism, right? So the protection of persons subjected to forced transgender is ensured here. It means that they are more protected now. So that is an important part. Okay. So the amendment does what? Positively, when you look at it, you will find that it seeks to strengthen protective and welfare oriented dimensions of the transgender legislation. But at the same time, this is also raising some concerns. And what are the concerns? Okay. So we see here that the most important constitutional concern is what? Now, we have moved away from the method of self-identification. And here what we see, there is a debate, and the debate is autonomy versus medicalization. It means that now you are required to accept medical board involvement, okay, and this may make gender recognition dependent on institutional or medical assessment rather than individual autonomy. So previously what we see, individual autonomy. Now that individual autonomy regarding self declaration has been compromised. Now we will have to be dependent on the institutions for medical assessment. This is the point. And the second important point is privacy concern. It means that if you want to get yourself declared as a transgender, so you will have to take the medical board as advice, and for that you will have to compulsorily disclose the verification of intimate bodily characteristics And this data, if it is leaked, it can create privacy concerns. So this is what privacy concern. The compulsory disclosure or compulsory verification of intimate bodily characteristics, it raises privacy concerns, right? And what about dignity? So if the state will determine whether an individual qualifies for legal recognition, the individual may have reduced control over their own identity. So here there is also a debate, that is state versus individual, that a state will have more power. Okay, so this amendment has generated a constitutional debate, and that's why it was in current debate and discussions in editorials, because of its relationship with Supreme Court's 2014 recognition of gender self identification in NALSA judgment 2014. What is the most important point? Self identify the gender. It means that the person could self identify the gender. Now 2026 amendment, okay, now this has been limited and a new thing has been introduced, and that is what? A formal certification process. So these have raised questions about whether the amendment is consistent with constitutional rights like equality, dignity and personal liberty. Okay, and Supreme Court is also examining these challenges. Supreme Court has not put the amendment on hold for now, but it has short responses from the concerned parties. So we can say that the main constitutional question is whether the government can limit a person's right to decide and identify their own gender. That is the most important point. So here, while writing answer, we can give references to 2014 NALSA judgment. We can give references to Puttaswamy versus Union of India case 2017. We can give references to, okay, this Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019. We can also talk about 2026 amendment, right? This is the point. So NALSA 2014 judgment, the most important points or keywords are self-identification and dignity of an individual. 2017 Puttaswamy, privacy and autonomy. 2019 Act, a statutory protection given to the transgender persons. And 2026 Act, what we see, medical and institutional certification and narrowing down the definition. So this raises a debate, constitutional question, welfare protection versus individual autonomy. So this we have discussed. So the core concepts, the core keywords that has been discussed in this question, I have discussed with you. That's, for example, right to privacy, self-identity, okay. Article 21, we have discussed about the amendments in 2026 Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, plus we also have discussed a few additional informations here, right? So it's right to privacy, self-identity and transgender rights. So right to privacy and dignity, I have discussed with you. Right to privacy and dignity, that privacy is essential to dignity and autonomy. Article 21 talks about right to life and personal liberty. Here, right to privacy and dignity, I have talked about Puttaswamy judgment 2017. It recognized privacy as a fundamental right, okay, and it encompasses decisions about one's body, identity and intimate life while talking about privacy. Now NALSA judgment 2014, the Supreme Court recognized transgender persons as third gender and upheld their right to self-identify their gender. So this self-identifying of gender is the most important point here from NALSA judgment 2014, right? And Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, okay. What happened? Legal recognition and protection against discrimination. But in 2026 amendment, what we see? Narrowing down of definition. I have discussed with you medical board certification, easier change of name in documents, but you will have to follow this process mechanism, right? So this is the point here. A stronger penalties for coercion and exploitation. Now, what are the key features of 2026 amendment? I have already discussed. Narrower definition, it means that it excludes self-perceived sexual identities from a statutory definition. Medical board certification, it means identify certificate with involvement of a medical board headed by CMO or deputy CMO. Documentation, it facilitates change of first name in birth certificate and official records. A stronger protection, right? Harsher punishment for kidnapping, grievances, injury, and coercing someone into being transgender. Now, what is the effect or impact? There are positive impacts and there are concerns. So, in positive impacts, protection from coercion and exploitation, clarity in procedure and documentation. Positive impact, easier name changes in official records. Positive impact is institutional mechanism for verification. But there are concerns also. And what is the concern? So, exclusion of self-perceived identities, medicalization of identity undermines autonomy and privacy intrusion through medical assessment, and it may create or it may result in bureaucratic barriers and delays. That is the point. So there are positive impacts as well as concerns. Now, what are the suggestions or way forward? So here we see that ensuring privacy and confidentiality in the certification process is very much important. Making procedures simple, accessible, and time bound is very much important. Sensitization of officials and society to reduce stigma and discrimination is very much important. And continuous review to ensure consistency with the Constitution and Supreme Court judgments. This is the most important point. It means that we can conclude that 2026 amendment aims to protect transgender persons from exploitation and improve documentation, but true justice lies in harmonizing state protection with self-determination, privacy, dignity, and equality. So here you see that I have not written the full sentences or complete sentences. So this is also a method of writing answer, that looking at the question we should identify that what are the main areas which has been discussed or what is the demand of the question. Then according to demand of the question, we should just categorize some dimensions, and then we should write dimensions. Okay, and in the dimensions we should write the keywords only. We should not write the full sentences. So in this way we can write our answer in 150 words. According to the question, it talks about what? Changes and the effect of the changes or impact of the changes. So this 2026 amendment we have talked here, and effect and impact of the changes plus way forward we have discussed. But while explaining this concept, okay, in the background we will have to discuss about Nalsa judgment, we have to discuss about Puttaswamy judgment. In the background we need to discuss that. So this is the answer. But if you want to write the same answer in IBC format, introduction, body, and conclusion format, so you can also choose this format to write the answer of this question, right? So in the answer of this question, in introduction part here, you see this is the introduction part, this is main body, and lastly you can write the conclusion. Here we have also given suggestions. So now in introduction you can write that the right to privacy under Article 21 protects dignity, autonomy, and intimate personal choices in NALSA 2014. The Supreme Court recognized transgender persons' right to self-identify their gender in 2014, making identity a matter of constitutional dignity. In main body, I have written that TPPRA, it means that Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Amendment Act 2026 seeks to strengthen protection against coercion and exploitation, and provides greater clarity regarding identity documentation. However, it significantly changes the earlier framework by narrowing the statutory definition of transgender persons and removing explicit recognition of self-perceived gender identity. Now it also introduces a medical board involvement in identity certification, and this creates a tension between protective regulation and individual autonomy. Medical certification may improve administrative verification and prevent misuse, but it can also increase bureaucratic barriers, expose intimate information, and weaken decisional privacy. Since Puttaswamy treats privacy as intrinsic to dignity and autonomy, restrictions must satisfy legality, legitimate state purpose, and proportionality. Now here, way forward, we can write implementation should therefore ensure confidentiality, minimum intrusive procedures, accessible grievance redressal. All these are what? Ensuring confidentiality, minimum intrusive procedures, accessible grievance redressal, constitutional review, protecting transgender persons from discrimination and coercion. All these are the keywords. So when you will practice writing answers, then you will be expert in writing such keywords in your answer. Now in conclusion, I have written that thus the amendments protective objectives are significant, but transgender justice ultimately requires balancing state protection with self-determination, privacy, dignity, and substantive equality. So this is what a balanced assessment and judgment. So we have discussed the model answer too. I have discussed the theme also. Now I hope that you are familiar with the theme that has been asked in this paper. Now we are moving ahead in the very next question. Now the next question says that the next question is related to the theme tribal development and equity. This is the theme, tribal development and equity. Now highlight this word equity. It has been repeated multiple times in your paper itself. And the question is asking that, does India's tribal development policy reflect the aspirations for a socially grounded and equity based governance? So here two kind of governance has been discussed. One is socially grounded governance and equity based governance. Justify your answer, right? So the question is asking here, there are different keywords. For example, it is related to tribal development policy, right? And it is asking that the policy reflect the aspirations. It means that here again what we see that UPSC is not only asking to write about some policy, but it is asking that this policy reflect the aspirations of a socially grounded governance and equity based governance or not. You will have to justify your answer. That is the most important point. So here we don't have to simply write ki tribal policies have been successfully or not. No, but we have to make an assessment whether India's tribal development approach is reflecting socially grounded governance, whether our tribal development approach is reflecting equity based governance. So first we should understand two keywords. The first is socially grounded governance. This has been given here, this word socially grounded governance. So we must understand this keyword. And second keyword here is equity based governance. Equity based governance. So understanding of these two keywords is very much important. So whenever we talk about socially grounded governance, it means that we are talking about the policies which are rooted in tribal realities, policies rooted in culture and community institutions and local participation. If the policies are directed like this, they are ensuring socially grounded governance. Got it? It means that the policies should reflect tribal realities, okay, should protect and preserve tribal culture, should protect and promote community institutions, should promote local participation. And if the policy is reflecting all these things, then we can say that the governance is socially grounded governance, right? Now, when we talk about equity based governance, so it means that equal opportunity plus also correction of historical disadvantages, and how this historical disadvantages could be corrected by affirmative action, by resource rights and targeted welfare, right? So justification here, we have to justify in answer, we have to justify your answer. It means that we have to present both the pictures, the achievements of the policies, as well as we have to identify the limitations of the policies. It means that achievements as well as limitations. So both these two dimensions, it means that achievements as well as limitations. Both these two dimensions we have to explain in our answer. And whenever we talk about tribal development, here the question is relating to tribal development. So tribal development simply means what? Whenever we see tribal development simply means we are talking about socio-economic, political and cultural advancement of tribal scheduled tribes, right? That is tribal development. We are talking about socio-economic, political and cultural advancement of scheduled tribes. That is tribal development. Socially grounded policies, now you have understood. Now equity means not only equal treatment, but when we are addressing the historical deprivation also, when we are addressing the unequal starting point, okay, so that is what, that is the concept is equity. Now governance, when we talk about governance, obviously we will talk about participation, we will talk about accountability, we will talk about rights, we will talk about implementation of delivery of public services, right? So all this we have to answer. Okay, now let's start the discussion of the answer. You can say not answer but the theme, right? For example, we are talking about India's tribal development policy, right? We all know that India's tribal development policy is evolving in nature. It means that it has gradually evolved. Our tribal development policy has gradually evolved. Previously, it was based on a welfare oriented approach, but now it has shifted towards a right based and participatory approach, right? This is the most important point. And here we have to balance two objectives. First, whenever you will talk or whenever you will make efforts for the development of tribal communities, so this might be possible that the development will become a source of displacement. This might be a possibility that the development will become a source of cultural erosion. This might be a policy that the development could result in the loss of community rights. So this tribal development should be understood not merely as an income enhancement effort for the tribal people, but here we should focus on, for example, I told you that now we have shifted to right based and participatory approach. It means that now for tribal development we have shifted our focus to capability enhancement of the tribals, to increase the political participation of the tribals, to increase the cultural protection of the tribals, to give them rights over the resources, plus protecting their dignity. Now in our constitution also, our constitution provides a framework for tribal governance. For example, in DPSP Directive Principles of State Policy, Article 46 directs the state to promote the educational and economic interest of scheduled tribes and protect them from social injustice and exploitation. This is in Article 46, right? DPSP is directing the state according to Article 46 to promote the educational and economic interest of the STs, scheduled tribes, and protecting them from social injustice and exploitation. Now in constitution we see fifth schedule. Fifth schedule does what? It provides a special administrative framework for scheduled areas and tribal communities who are living outside the sixth scheduled areas. And what is about sixth schedule? So we all know that sixth schedule provides autonomous institutional arrangements for tribal areas in AMTM, Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. Now in our constitution there is Article 244, which connects the fifth and sixth schedule with administration of scheduled areas and tribal areas. Now in our constitution there is another article, that is Article 275 section 1. And Article 275 section 1 provides for grants to states for promoting the welfare of scheduled tribes and improving administration in scheduled areas. Now we have another article, that is Article 338A, which provides for the NCST, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. And this shows that there is a constitutional framework also to protect the rights of the tribal. This shows that the tribal governance, it was conceived as protective, it was conceived as developmental, It was conceived as institutionally differentiated rather than as ordinary welfare administration. So our constitution also provides a framework. Now, I told you that we have shifted. It means that tribal policies constantly evolving. We have shifted from a welfare based approach to right based tribal governance. So this transformation can be seen, for example, welfare approach, we thought protecting tribals from exploitation, now giving them political safeguards, resource and forest rights. Now we are talking about participatory governance. It means that capability plus dignity plus self-governance, right? This is important. Now evolving means what? When we are talking about tribal policy, so we must talk about two laws. One is PESA 1996, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas 1996, and the second is FRA 2006, FRA 2006, Forest Rights Act 2006. So whenever you are talking about tribal policies, so you must mention these two laws, Forest Rights Act 2006 and PESA, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996. Okay, so the PESA Act, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act, seeks to extend Panchayati Raj to scheduled areas while recognizing the importance of Gram Sabha and customary community institutions. And therefore, we see that it represents the movement towards a participatory and decentralized tribal governance. So, PESA 1996 shows what? That policy is evolving. Its PESA 1996 is like a movement towards participatory and decentralized land governance. And when we talk about FRA 2006, Forest Rights Act 2006, so FRA recognizes individual and community forest right of forest dwelling scheduled tribes and other forest dwelling communities, traditional forest dwellers. It seeks to address historical injustice arising from non-recognition of customary forest rights. And this is important because for many tribal communities, for example, our tribal policy should be focused at promoting integrated social system for the tribals. And when we talk about integrated social system of the tribals, it means that we have to focus on land, we have to focus on forest, we have to focus on culture, we have to focus on livelihood of the tribal people. Therefore, what we see that land rights are also social and cultural rights. Now, there is a very important approach, that is capability approach of Amartya Sen, which you can relate here. That the tribal development should expand tribal people's real capabilities to access education, to obtain health care, to earn livelihood, and to participate in decisions and to exercise freedom, right? So in this way we can relate this concept also. We can relate the concept of MN Srinivas also, right? That tribal communities are not static entities. They experience interaction, tribal people experience interaction with markets, tribal people experience interaction with state institutions, tribal people experience interaction with a wider society. Therefore, the policy should avoid both forced assimilation, the policy should avoid, and the policy should also avoid romantic isolationism. So the objectives should be empowered integration with cultural autonomy, and that is what we should make our effort to make a more integrated system for the tribal people, right? Now, we will talk about targeted welfare. So what is targeted welfare? So the state has created dedicated interventions for tribal communities. For example, in education field and health, nutrition, housing, livelihood, infrastructure, scholarship, entrepreneurship, you will find that the state has created dedicated interventions and efforts. You must have heard about PM Janman scheme. So what is PM Janman? Pradhan Mantri Janman, PM Janman. This is also some schemes. You can write it like example, you can give references. Janman is what? प्रधानमंत्री जनजाति आदिवासी न्याय महा अभियान, that is Janman, PM Janman, right? It was launched, this scheme was launched for the socio-economic development of 75 PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups, communities across 18 states and 1 union territory. Focus on housing, drinking water, education, health, nutrition, connectivity, and livelihood. So always remember, PM Janman means what? Pradhan Mantri Janajati Adivasi Nyay Mahabhiyan, launched in 2023. The target group is 75 PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. It covers 18 states plus 1 UT. The budget was 24,104 crores. And what was the main aim here? To improve the socio-economic conditions and quality life of PVTGs by providing basic facilities like safe housing, clean drinking water, health and nutrition, education, electricity, roads and connectivity, telecom and mobile connectivity, and sustainable livelihoods. Okay. Now, it also includes mobile medical units, Anganwadi centers, multi-purpose centers, Van Dhan Vikas Kendra, and livelihood support system. Okay. So what we see here, we see that PM Janman scheme represents a targeted approach to the tribal development, focusing specifically on India's most vulnerable tribal community. In the same way, there is another scheme, and that is Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram, Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, DAJGUA, Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan. It was launched in 2024. Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, launched on 2nd October, Gandhi Jayanti, by the Prime Minister in Hazaribagh, Jharkhand. And for duration of 5 years, it means that it was launched in 2024-25. So for till 2028-29, this program has been launched. So it is a part of our current affairs. Okay. In 2027 also, 2028 also, and 2029 also. The budget was 79,156 crores. The center share was 56,333 crores, and the state share was 22,823 crores. You don't have to write all the facts, but since I am discussing in detail, that's why I am covering the data. And the coverage was about 63,843 tribal majority villages, right? So this is the point here. The focus area in Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan was infrastructure, health, education, Anganwadi services, housing, connectivity, and livelihood. Okay. So this is the point here. So what we see that this scheme is also a convergence based, saturation oriented mission for the holistic development of tribal majority villages. Now when we talk about education, so Eklavya model residential schools, this is also very important, right? Eklavya model residential schools, that is EMRS, they were started in 97-98, and the objective was to provide quality education to ST children, especially in remote tribal areas. Okay, the ministry is Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and the target was providing quality residential education from class 6 to class 12. Okay, and each school under this scheme generally accommodates 480 students. Okay, and the purpose was not to give them academics education only, but sports, skill development, extracurricular activities, and preservation of tribal culture, right? So EMRS, Eklavya Model Residential School, is planned for those blocks having more than 50% ST population and at least 20,000 tribal people based on census 2011. Okay, so current status is what? Okay, till 6th March 2026, there were 499 Eklavya Model Residential Schools that were operational, and about 1.56 lakh students were enrolled here. Okay, so EMRS, Eklavya Model Residential School, aims to bridge the educational gap between tribal and non-tribal population through quality residential education and holistic development. Now, For livelihood promotion of the tribal people, initiatives related to tribal product, forest produce, entrepreneurship and skill development attempt to connect tribal communities with markets while strengthening livelihood opportunities. But we have talked about so many policies, but these policies are still not fully socially grounded. This we have to answer, that these policies are not still fully socially grounded, and this is the critical part of your answer. Why they are not fully socially grounded? The one reason is land alienation and displacement. It means that mining, dams, infrastructure and industrial projects can create displacement and livelihood disruption. It means that development without adequate rehabilitation creates the challenge for social insecurity. There are implementation gaps. Okay, it means that the implementation of these policies at local level is constrained by administrative capacity. It is constrained by lack of awareness. It is constrained by procedural delays. It is constrained by weak coordination. It is constrained by inadequate last mile delivery. It is constrained by participation deficit. So the tribal communities may remain recipients rather than genuine co-designers of development policy. Okay. Now, what about cultural homogenization? So mainstream development models, whenever we absorb them, we find that these models undervalue tribal languages. These models undervalue customary institutions. These models undervalue indigenous ecological knowledge. These models undervalue traditional livelihood. Okay, and ultimately, lastly, the human development deficits like education, healthcare, nutrition, connectivity, and employment gaps continue to affect many tribal regions, right? So the tribal livelihood may intersect with forests. The tribal livelihood may intersect with wildlife conservation. The tribal livelihood may intersect with infrastructure expansion, creating difficult questions of rights versus conservation. Okay, so that is the point. Now, policy intent, that is the most important part here, that I have discussed with you, that policy intent is strong. Why policy intent is strong? Policy intent and policy design and policy implementation and policy outcome. Okay, there are four pillars. First is policy intent related to tribal policy. So what is the policy intent? It is strong because we see constitutional safeguards, we see affirmative action, we see rights-based legislation, we see targeted schemes for the tribal people. But what about policy design? We see policy design is also increasingly participatory. In policy design, we see acts like PESHA 1996, we see act like FRA 2006 plus Gram Sabha community rights. But what about policy implementation? The policy implementation is weaker. It is uneven. Policy implementation, what do we see? Administrative gaps. In policy implementation, what do we see? Weak participation. In policy implementation, what do we see? Poor service delivery. And what is the outcome of the policy? Outcome is also mixed. There are improved opportunity in some areas, but it is also true that at the same time there are persistent inequality, displacement and deprivation elsewhere. Hence the answer is partially yes, but with significant implementation gaps. You will say that the question is saying that, does India's tribal development policy reflect the aspirations of socially grounded and equity-based governance? You will say that yes, but not completely. What we are saying, partially yes, because we will discuss limitations also, because there are significant implementation gaps. I told you that the intent of the policy is strong, the design of the policy is strong, but the implementation of the policy is poorer. The outcome of the policy is mixed. So obviously our stand will be not completely yes, but partially yes. We cannot say no because there are a strong constitutional mechanism also. So obviously we cannot say no. So this is the answer. Now, while writing answer, I told you that there is a model of writing answer where we should use keywords. Okay, we should use keywords, and in the keywords we should identify the main themes. Then by using the keywords, by giving the references, we can write answer of this question. So this is one model. Okay, you don't have to draw the images, but the points you can write in your answer. For example, here I have talked about constitutional foundation. You can give reference to Article 46. You can give reference to 5th and 6th schedule. You can give reference to Article 2751, and you can give reference to Article 338A. Okay, so these are only references, and here in very short form, Article 46, without writing the full sentence, I have written that promote educational and economic interest of STs. 5th and 6th schedule, special administrative arrangements. Article 275(1), grants for tribal welfare. Article 338A, National Commission for STs, scheduled tribes, right? So what is the aim of this constitutional foundation? To promote protection, participation and promotion, right? Now the second point is what? Right-based and participatory approach. What is this? Gram Sabha. Here you can give reference to PESA 1996 and Forest Rights Act 2006. PESA 1996 empowers Gram Sabha and local self-governance, and Forest Rights Act 2006 recognizes individual and community forest right and participatory planning and community decisions, right? People here are at the center of the development. Now, what are the key development interventions? So you can write the name of schemes like PM Janman, like Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, okay, education, livelihood, health and nutrition, and infrastructure. So PM Janman focuses on PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups, housing, water, health, education, nutrition, connectivity, and livelihood. Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, convergence of 17 ministries and 25 interventions. Education में एकलव्य मॉडल, residential school CMRS, scholarship quality improvement. In livelihood we can talk about minor forest produce, skills entrepreneurship, market linkages. Health and nutrition we can talk about targeted programs for tribal areas. Infrastructure here we are talking about roads, electricity, digital connectivity and housing. So here targeted support for what? For capability enhancement, that is based on Amartya Sen approach, capability enhancement, right? So this is the point here. It means that development and welfare, rights and autonomy, okay, balanced and inclusive tribal development. This is the point. But still what we see, there are gaps and challenges. And what are these challenges? Now the challenges are written. Again, only keywords, not full sentences like challenges. The first challenge is land alienation and displacement due to mining, dams and projects. The second challenge is poor implementation of PESA and FRA in many areas. The third challenge is low quality education, health and basic services. The fourth challenge is limited participation in planning and decision making. The fifth challenge is cultural erosion and loss of traditional knowledge. The sixth challenge is high malnutrition, poverty and unemployment. Now suggestions for way forward. Okay, so here are suggestions. Ensuring effective implementation of PESA, FRA, culturally sensitive education and healthcare. In this way you can write the suggestions, right? Okay. Conclusion, India's tribal development policy has a strong constitutional intent and progressive laws. However, socially grounded and equity-based governance requires effective participation, protection of rights, cultural respect and inclusive development outcomes. So it shows that we are saying partially yes. So there are different models, and based on the discussion, you can also change the format of answer. Now, since you have to write the answer of this question in 150 words, so here, okay, you can write answer like this. Okay, in introduction part, you can write that India's tribal policy has evolved from welfare and protection toward right-based participatory and capability-oriented development, to reflecting the constitutional commitment to social justice and substantive equality. In main body, why it reflects equity-based governance. So you can write what? Constitutional safeguards, right-based approach, targeted development and convergence, right? So in constitutional safeguards, you can write references of 5th and 6th schedule, Article 46 and Article 275(1). In right-based approach, you can write PESA recognizes Gram Sabha based participation, while the Forest Rights Act 2006 recognizes individual and community forest rights. You can talk about targeted development. PM Janman focuses on basic services and livelihoods for PVTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Convergence, Dharti Aba Janajatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, integrates infrastructure, health, education, and livelihood interventions. Now, why the aspiration remains incomplete? Here you will write the challenges like land alienation and displacement due to development projects, gaps in implementation of PESA and FRA, unequal access to quality health, education, and livelihood, limited community participation in project design, risk of cultural erosion, and excessive bureaucratization. In way forward, you can write keywords like strengthening Gram Sabha autonomy, ensuring effective implementation of FRA and PESA. These are suggestions. Adopting culturally sensitive service delivery, improving last mile governance, and make tribal communities partners rather than beneficiaries of development. And in conclusion, you can write that thus India's tribal policy has a strong constitutional and policy foundations for equity, but socially grounded governance will become meaningful only when rights, participation, cultural dignity, and development outcomes converge. So in this way, we can write answer of this question. Now we are coming to question number 7. Again, this question number 7 is a 10 marker question, and you have to write answer of this question in 150 words. So here we have to write the answer of this question in 150 words. Now what is the question? What is the theme? So the theme is malnutrition and social equity. Again, the word has been used here, equity. And the question is, malnutrition in India is not merely a public health concern. It is also a challenge of social equity, challenge of human development, and challenge of effective welfare governance discussed. This is the question. Now, the main theme here is malnutrition, but at the same time, it is also talking about social equity. Okay. And here you have to discuss. Discussing here means you should explain that why malnutrition, kuposhan, is a health issue. And you have to establish the connection or linkages of malnutrition with inequality in society. You will have to discuss the implications of malnutrition on human development. You will have to examine the role and limitations of welfare governance when we are trying to fight with this malnutrition. And lastly, we have to give suggestions also. In your GS classes, you must have read about this topic, malnutrition, undernutrition, overnutrition, micronutrient deficiencies. You must have read. You must have read about unequal access to food, unequal access to healthcare, sanitation, and opportunities based on caste, class, gender, reason, and poverty. You all are familiar, right? Human development, you must have read about how nutrition affects survival, how nutrition affects cognitive development, how nutrition affects learning, how nutrition affects productivity and future capability. Okay, welfare governance, you all know the meaning, that schemes, the government introduces schemes, and the effectiveness of schemes depends on targeting, convergence, last mile delivery, accountability, and community participation. Okay, so here basically we have to discuss about malnutrition, we have to discuss about structural deprivation, we have to discuss about unequal exposure of excess, we have to discuss about poor health, cognitive loss. Okay, so these are the keywords that we have to discuss. Now first, before entering into this discussion part of this question, first I will tell you that when we think about malnutrition, generally we think that malnutrition is lack of food, but this is a traditional and conventional approach of looking at the malnutrition. Malnutrition should not only be limited or reduced to the lack of food. Malnutrition results as a result of interaction of multiple elements, like, okay, malnutrition means what? Food insecurity, poor diet quality, diseases, inadequate sanitation, poor mental health, poverty, care practices, weak access to public services. And when you integrate all this, this is what? Malnutrition. It means that malnutrition is multifactorial. If we look malnutrition from the modern definition basically Niti Aayog has defined it, that malnutrition, that we should not look malnutrition from the traditional and conventional approach. It is not only lack of food, but malnutrition is multifactorial. Okay, like I discussed with you, that malnutrition should be linked with nutritious food ability, malnutrition should be linked with sanitation, malnutrition should be linked with illness, malnutrition should be linked with care practices, malnutrition should be linked with maternal literacy, malnutrition should be linked with women's status, malnutrition should be linked with poverty and income distribution. Okay, so when we talk about malnutrition, it is a consequence, it is a cause of inequality, and as well as it is also a consequence of inequality. This might be a possible that the same statement could be asked as a question, that malnutrition is both a consequence and a cause of inequality, explain. Again, the question will be same, but words will be different. So always remember that malnutrition is also the cause of equality, and at the same time, cause of inequality, sorry, it is cause of inequality, and at the same time, malnutrition is also the consequence of inequality. Okay, so poor households are more vulnerable to malnutrition, right? Malnutrition reduces children's physical and cognitive capabilities, and it ensures the future inequality. Okay, so malnutrition is a public health issue because what we see that it results in impaired immunity, greater vulnerability to infections, stunting and wasting. All this has been asked in prelims also. Malnutrition means what? Anemia and micronutrient deficiencies. Malnutrition is also related to maternal and child health risks. Malnutrition is also related to higher morbidity and mortality. So the first 1000 days pregnancy to the child's second birthday is particularly important because nutritional deprivation during the first 1000 days can have long-term consequences. Okay, because all these things are related. For example, stunting means what? Stunting means chronic undernutrition. Wasting means what? Acute undernutrition or low weight for height. Underweight, low weight for age. Micronutrient deficiency means inadequate vitamins, minerals such as iron deficiency, which leads to anemia. Now the question is, why malnutrition is a social equity issue? Because malnutrition is socially distributed. It is not randomly distributed, but it is socially distributed. Malnutrition is related to poverty. Because if you are poor, you can face constraints in accessing diverse diets. If you are poor, you can face constraints in accessing protein-rich foods. If you are poor, you can face constraints in accessing healthcare facilities. If you are poor, you can face constraint in accessing clean hygiene, sanitation, clean water. It is also linked with gender inequality. We often see that women and girls may face unequal intra-household food allocation, early marriages, early pregnancy, inadequate maternal nutrition. All these are linked with, okay, this malnutrition. Caste and tribe, these identities, these marginalized communities, they also face cumulative disadvantages with respect to income, with respect to land, with respect to education, with respect to healthcare, with respect to food security, right? This is the point. So we see that malnutrition burdens in vulnerable populations, including rural people and dusty households, is more. And lastly, we should also talk about regional inequality, because Niti Aayog focuses on this, that nutrition outcomes vary significantly across different states and districts. Therefore, when we are trying to fight with this challenge menace of malnutrition, so one size fits all approach will always be inadequate. Therefore, we must have a granular approach because nutritional challenges vary across geographical and social contexts. Okay, malnutrition is also linked with human development, because we all know that good nutrition will do what? Will be helpful in cognitive development. So if a child is facing nutritional deprivation, so it can result in, okay, impaired brain development. The learning ability will be affected, the school performance will be affected, skills and productivity will be affected. Okay, so optimum nutrition is linked to physical and cognitive development, better learning outcomes, productive and economic growth. So malnutrition is a human capital problem. It is not only a calorie problem. So we should not look at the malnutrition as a calorie problem or only. We should see it like a human capital problem. It means that This challenge can weaken, malnutrition can weaken India's ability to realize its demographic dividend. So that is the most important point. Now we can again relate Amartya Sen capability approach here, that nutrition expands the basic capabilities that are necessary to learn, to work, to participate, to live in a healthy life. Therefore, malnutrition represents a capability deprivation. We can relate this concept. Okay, we can relate the B.R. Ambedkar concept of substantive equality, that formal equality is insufficient when people begin from radically unequal social and economic positions. So equal access to welfare does not mean equitable nutritional outcomes. Targeted interventions are necessary for disadvantageous groups. So this you have to write in your answer. While writing answer, you can talk about major interventions by the state to fight this challenge. For example, Poshan Abhiyan, which focuses on improving nutritional outcomes through convergence, monitoring, technology and behavioral change. We can talk about ICDS, Anganwadi services, which provides supplementary nutrition and related maternal child services. We can talk about intervention like Poshan 2.0, which strengthens the nutrition support architecture through an integrated approach. We can talk about PM Poshan, which supports school meals that address classroom hunger and nutritional support among children. We can talk about intervention like Anemia Mukt Bharat, which targets anemia through supplementation, screening and behavior change measures. We can talk about food security interventions. The food security architecture provide an important safety net against household food security. Now, the question is, there is implementation gap, because we all know that good policy design does not mean good delivery outcome or delivery outcome. Problems may occur because of inadequate frontline capacity. Problems may occur due to weak monitoring, due to exclusion errors, due to irregular service delivery. Okay, quality of diet. When we talk about quality of diet, so food security does not mean nutrition security. Today we talk about food security, but we don't talk about nutrition security. A cereal heavy diet may provide calories without adequate protein, micronutrient and dietary diversity. So these are the concerns, that inadequate consumption of pulses, vegetables, fruits and other nutrient rich foods. Sanitation and disease. Okay, poor sanitation will do what? Poor sanitation can increase infection and it can reduce nutrient absorption. Therefore, food plus wash plus healthcare must operate together. Breastfeeding, complementary feeding and dietary practices are also important. Okay, and what we see, the challenges are what? Multiple ministries and programs can produce communication problems, coordination problem, right? So there are problems also. Okay, so we have to talk about food security, we have to talk about nutrition security. Okay, this is the point here. So I hope that you have understood the theme. In suggestions, you can write that now we should shift from calorie security to nutritional security. This is suggestion. We should promote what? Dietary diversity, pulses, millets, fruits and vegetables, protein rich foods and micronutrients. Second suggestion, you can write focus on the first 1000 days. Prioritize pregnant women, lactating mothers, infants, complementary feeding. Third suggestion you can write is about women's empowerment. It can improve girls' education, maternal nutrition, reproductive health care, women's decision-making power. Fourth suggestion you can write is about strengthening Anganwadi systems, improving infrastructure, frontline worker capacity, increasing the numbers, growth monitoring, referral mechanism, quality of supplementary nutrition. Fifth suggestion you can write is localizing nutrition governance, using Gram Panchayats, self-help groups, Anganwadi, Asha and community monitoring to develop locally appropriate nutrition strategy. The sixth suggestion you can write is data-driven governance, using nutrition surveillance and district level indicators to identify high burden population and improve targeting. The fourth suggestion you can write that we should move towards nutrition, health, wash, education, food security, women's empowerment. In this way, we can write the answer. Now, the challenge is what? We have to write the answer of this question in 150 words. Okay, this is the challenge. So, this is one approach, that whatever we have discussed, identify the core areas that are the main demand of the question, and dividing your answers in different dimensions and writing keywords only without writing the full sentences. You can also write the answer. Here we are talking about malnutrition, right? And here the first point we have discussed here about the root causes or the social determinants for malnutrition. First is poverty and food insecurity. The second is gender inequality. The third is inadequate sanitation and poor wash. The fourth is low education and awareness. The fifth is social cultural factors. The sixth is regional and social disparities. Now, while explaining these dimensions, I have used keyword only. For example, poverty and food insecurity, the keywords like low income, unemployment, food affordability. In gender inequality, the keywords like discrimination, unequal food distribution, early marriage, heavy work burden. Inadequate sanitation and poor wash, we can write points like frequent infections, poor nutrient absorption. Low education and awareness, we can write points like poor knowledge on diet, breastfeeding and childcare. Social cultural factors, we can write points like taboos, food practices, limited dietary diversity. Regional and social disparities, we can write points like tribal areas, rural pockets, caste and class based exclusion. Now this is the vicious cycle of malnutrition, poverty and deprivation. Okay, poor learning, low productivity, malnourished mother, low birth weight, poor growth, children malnutrition, poor learning, low productivity, and poverty and deprivation continue. This is what generational poverty concept. Now third consequences, what are the consequences? So the main points are poor health outcome, impaired cognitive development, low education and skills, lower productivity and income, societal inequality and exclusion, hindrance to human development. Now you can write keywords here. In poor health outcomes, you can write points like stunting, wasting, anemia, low immunity and disease burden. In the point impaired cognitive development, here you can write poor concentration, learning difficulties, lower IQ. Here in low education and skills, you can write points like dropouts, low attainment, limited opportunities. Here in lower productivity and income, you can write points like reduced earning potential, perpetuates poverty. In the social inequality and exclusion, you can write points like affects marginalized groups disproportionality. Hindrance to human development, you can write points like limits demographic dividend and inclusive growth. Now the perspectives here, you can write some names like Amartya Sen and B.R. Ambedkar. Okay, in Amartya Sen, you can write malnutrition is deprivation of basic capabilities. This is explanation in very short. Okay, B.R. Ambedkar, you can write social democracy requires addressing structural inequalities, not just formal equality. Pierre Bourdieu, you can write point like inequality in economic, social and cultural capital influences nutritional outcomes. There is no need to write all three. You can write mention one, okay, or you can write the names only. Okay, so in this way you can manage. In government interventions, you can give examples of some schemes and interventions like Poshan Abhiyan, ICDS Anganwadi Services, Poshan 2.0, PM Poshan, Anemia Mukt Bharat, food security programs. In Poshan Abhiyan, you can write keywords like convergence, technology and behavior change. In ICDS and Anganwadi Services, you can write keywords like supplementary nutrition, growth monitoring, preschool education. In Poshan 2.0, you can write keywords like strengthening nutrition support architecture. In PM Poshan, you can write keywords like nutritious meals in schools. In Anemia Mukt Bharat, you can write points like screening, IFS supplementation and behavior change. In food security program, you can write points like NFSA, PDS, PMGKAY, safety net against hunger, right? What are the gaps and governance challenges? So poor last mile delivery, weak convergence among departments, inadequate monitoring and data quality, low dietary diversity, limited community participation and accountability. And lastly, you can write suggestions or way forward. Okay, and you can write conclusion like eradicating malnutrition is essential for social justice, human development and building an equitable, healthy. So here the question is, malnutrition in India is not merely a public health concern, but it is also a challenge of social equity, human development and effective welfare governance. Now I hope that you have entered into depth of this topic, but if you want to write the answer in introduction, body and conclusion format, so the answer will be like this. In introduction part, I have written that malnutrition is a multidimensional deprivation. Multidimensional deprivation, this is an important word, right? Arising from inadequate diets, diseases, poverty, poor sanitation, and unequal access to services. Thus, it simultaneously reflects India's public health, social equity, and governance challenge. In main body, we will explain why it is a social equity issue. Because poverty limits access to diverse and nutritious diets. Gender inequality affects maternal and child nutrition. Tribal, rural, and other vulnerable communities face cumulative disadvantages. Regional variations require context-specific interventions. Human development consequences, we can write, malnutrition affects physical growth, immunity, and cognitive development, thereby weakening educational attainment, productivity, and India's demographic dividend. Okay, in main body, we can write governance challenge. We can write references of programs or interventions like Poshan Abhiyan, ICDS, PM Poshan, and Anemia Mukt Bharat demonstrate state commitment. However, fragmented implementation, these are the limitations. Fragmented implementation, limitation, weak convergence, limitation, inadequate dietary diversity, limitation, sanitation deficits, and limitation, last mile delivery gaps limit outcomes. Poshan itself emphasizes multi-sectoral convergence and behavioral change. Suggestions or way forward, we can write adopt a nutrition security approach, integrating food, healthcare, WASH, women's empowerment and education, strengthen Anganwadis, focus on the first 1000 days, improve district level targeting and institutionalize community-based monitoring. And lastly, we can write conclusion like therefore eliminating malnutrition requires moving from welfare delivery to capability enhancement, ensuring that every child has the nutritional foundation necessary for health, learning, dignity, and equal opportunity. So this is what you have to write in your answer. Now we are coming to the next question, that is question number 18, right? So this question is related to the theme education, welfare versus a strategic investment. Okay, this is the theme. Now this is a 15 marker question. You have to write answer of this question in 250 words. The core theme is education, and the question is asking that should education be treated primarily as a welfare obligation of the state, or education should be treated as a strategic investment for building a globally competitive knowledge driven nation. Critically evaluate. So the directive keyword is critically evaluate. Now when you read the question carefully, you will find that the question is trying to confuse us. Question is trying to present before us a binary picture, and this binary is a false binary. The question is saying, should education be treated primarily as this or this? Either this or this. This is binary, and this is a false binary. Either or, it means that education here should not be taken as either or. It means that at the same time, education should be treated as a welfare obligation of a state, and it should also be treated as a strategic investment for building a globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation. So this is the most important point. So you will have to be very cautious that the question is trying to create a false binary. Okay. So if you understand that the question is trying to create a false binary, okay, and if you will take the right approach and stand that education means both, right? It should be treated as a welfare obligation of a state, and it should also be treated as a strategic investment for building a globally competitive, knowledge-driven system. If you identify this binary, false binary, and if you explain this dimension, the demand of the question is addressed. Okay, so you must understand this. Now the one word keyword that has been used here is welfare obligation of the state. So what is this welfare obligation? Okay, welfare obligation simply means constitutional perspective, social justice perspective, equal opportunity perspective, inclusion of disadvantaged groups perspective, universal access and affordability perspective. And when we talk about a strategic investment, the second keyword is a strategic investment. A strategic investment means what? We are talking about education is related to human capital formation, education related to innovation and productivity, education related to employability as well as skills, education related to global competitiveness, education related to knowledge economy. So we have to argue that education is both a social right, education is both a public obligation and a strategic investment. Okay, so if we will treat exclusively it as either welfare or strategic investment, so that is not right approach. Okay, so we have to write about these both dimensions. So why education is a welfare obligation of the state? We all know that education is not an ordinary commodity, because unequal access to education can reproduce the inequalities that are already existing in the society. That's why the state should focus on providing equal education. There is a debate that the status of government schools must be improved. Why it must be improved? If the government school status will not be improved, if the government school will not provide qualitative education at par with the private schools, then what will happen? The existing inequality in the society will continue to maintain. So education is not an ordinary commodity. Unequal access to education will reproduce the existing inequality in the society, and that's why this education is a welfare obligation of the state. And in constitution you will find that there is a framework, there are provisions to promote education. For example, in fundamental rights, Article 21A, what does it provide? It provides for the right to free and compulsory education for children aged 6 to 14 years. In DPSP, Directive Principles of State Policy, Article 45, what does it direct? Article 45 directs that the state should, okay, work, or the state should take responsibility for early childhood care and education. This is the duty of the state, to promote education, early childhood care and education. Article 46 of DPSP promotes the education and economic interest of the weaker sections, particularly scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Therefore, education contributes to substantive equality, not formal equality. But what is the difference between formal equality and substantive equality? Do you understand the difference between formal and substantive equality? So देखो, when we say equal treatment for everyone, right, that is formal equality, right? When we say that treating everyone in the same manner, that is formal equality. When we say that while treating everyone as equal, when we ignore existing social and economic inequalities, that is formal equality. Okay, for example, same exam conditions for all, there should be no reservation. This is the concept of formal equality. But when we say substantive equality, it means that equal outcomes, equal opportunity by addressing disadvantages. It means that when we say substantive equality, we focus on treating people according to their needs. When we say substantive equality, it means we do recognize historical and structural inequalities. For example, reservation for a disadvantaged group. That is what the concept of substantive equality. So always remember that formal equality means what? Equality in treatment. Substantive equality means what? Equality in real opportunities and outcomes. So education as a social justice. We should treat education as a social justice, as a tool of social justice, because we know that if there is poverty, you will get low education, you will get low skills, ultimately you will have low income. So this will create a chain of intergenerational poverty. So education expands capabilities. Education enables individuals to participate meaningfully in economic, political, and social life. And this connects strongly with again the same approach, Amartya Sen's capability approach. You can relate this approach here also. So there are some common concepts which you must you should make notes. Wherever you get a chance to apply that concept, you will apply. For example, Amartya Sen capability approach, in 3 questions we have discussed the same approach, that the education expands people substantive freedoms and capabilities, and it is helpful in correcting structural inequality. Public education is important for economically weaker households. It is important, education is important for SCs, STs. Education is important for women and girls. Education is important for persons with disabilities. Education is important for rural populations. Education is important for minorities. Education is important for first generation learners. Therefore, if education is left entirely to the market forces, what will happen? There is unequal purchasing power in the society. So if you will leave education entirely to the market forces, so it will translate into unequal education opportunities for people in the society. And the second picture is what? Education is welfare obligation. Yes, but education is also a strategic investment. Why education is a strategic investment? Because education creates human capital. Education, as a result, skills, as a result, productivity will increase, as a result, innovation will increase, as a result, growth will increase. Therefore, when we talk about a knowledge-driven economy, so this knowledge-driven economy should have STEM capabilities, STEM capabilities. STEM means what? Science, technology, engineering, and maths. So if you have STEM capabilities, means the knowledge, skills, and problem solving abilities needed to understand and applies to these fields. Developing STEM capabilities, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics among tribal and rural youth will promote better employability, as a result, innovation, digital inclusion, and economic opportunities. Digital literacy, research, entrepreneurship, critical thinking, vocational skills, interdisciplinary learning. How is it possible? Through education. So education is a strategic investment. Today we talk about demographic dividend, that India's large working age population, it can become economic advantage only when it is supported by quality education. Only when this young population, this large working population, is supported by skills, health, and employment opportunities. Otherwise, this demographic dividend will become demographic burden. Universities and research institutions generate scientific knowledge, patents, technological innovation, entrepreneurship, skilled professionals. Therefore, education contributes to India's ability to compete in areas like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, semiconductors, space, green technology, advanced manufacturing. Okay, now we will talk about now we'll talk about global competitiveness, that a competitive knowledge economy, it will require not merely graduates but better learning outcomes in the students, high order skills. When we talk about National Education Policy 2020, we see that NEP, National Education Policy 2020, explicitly links high quality education with India's transformation into an equitable and vibrant knowledge society and a global knowledge superpower. Education is a public good. Education has benefits beyond the individual. An educated population contributes to better health outcomes, lower fertility, greater women participation, social mobility, democratic participation, innovation, productivity, social cohesion. Therefore, the state has a legitimate reason to invest even when private returns are uncertain. So private returns, education, better job, higher income. Social returns, education, informed citizens, healthier society, innovation, social cohesion, and economic growth. So that is the question central insight, that welfare and investment are not mutually exclusive. Welfare spending today can be an investment for tomorrow. For example, early childhood education. If the child will have better foundational learning, improved educational attainment, higher skills and greater productivity. Similarly, girls' education, you will see delayed marriage, improved maternal health, lower fertility, better child nutrition, great female work participation. Therefore, social expenditure can generate economic returns. And now India's challenge is it is increasingly shifting from access to quality. The expansion of schooling has improved enrollment, but learning outcomes, teacher quality, infrastructure, and equity remain important concerns. According to a survey, that is the Annual Status of Education Report Survey 2024, it continues to provide evidence on children's schooling and foundational reading and arithmetic levels in rural India. Schooling does not mean learning, and degree does not mean employability. Therefore, simply increasing expenditure without improving outcomes may not create a competitive knowledge economy. The National Education Policy 2020 is particularly useful for this question because it combines both the approaches. National Education Policy 2020 views education as a public service and stresses access to quality education, while simultaneously seeking to create an equitable knowledge society and global knowledge power. Its priorities include foundational literacy and numeracy, early childhood education, teacher development, research, technology, higher education reform, equitable access, and multidisciplinary learning. The new education policy also calls for public investment in education to reach 6% of GDP at the earliest, linking investment with equitable and high quality education. Okay, now a contemporary example I am giving you, some data I am giving you. 2026-27 Union Budget. The Ministry of Education reports an allocation of 1,39,289.48 crores for 2026-27, an 8.27% increase over 2025-26. And the Department of Higher Education allocation increased by 11.28%, which indicates the growing emphasis on higher education, skills, and human capital formation. And this supports the argument that education is increasingly being viewed not merely as a welfare expenditure, but as an investment in human capital and Viksit Bharat. You can apply a Amartya Sen capability approach here, that education expands substantive capabilities rather than merely income. Therefore, education is both an end in itself and a means to other freedoms. Families possessing greater cultural and economic capital can often provide educational advantages to their children. Therefore, market-driven education without adequate public intervention can reproduce class inequalities. So, education can be a mobility mechanism and reproduction mechanism. Hence, quality and equitable public education both are essential today. But what are the contradictions? What are the challenges? What are the limitations? The first limitation is commercialization of education. Excessive marketization can turn education into commodity, and it could result in deepening of inequality. And degrees without relevant skills can create educated unemployment. Technology can democratize education but also exclude students lacking smart devices, connectivity, and digital literacy. Quality teachers, infrastructure, and higher education opportunities remain uneven. A globally competitive education economy requires a strong investment in research and development, universities, and industry academia collaboration. Expanding institutions is sufficient if learning outcomes are associated with faculty quality, if it is associated with research quality. Okay, so we can say that it will be sufficient, but it is insufficient if learning outcome, okay, is weak, faculty quality is weak, research quality remains weak. So what should be the ideal approach here? We have discussed that education is what? Education should be treated primarily as a welfare obligation. At the same time, education should also be treated as a strategic investment for building a globally competitive, knowledge-driven nation. Now, using the concepts, for example, whatever has been discussed, you can also write the answer by writing the keywords only. Now, there are different dimensions: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In first dimension, education as a welfare obligation have been explained. Education as a strategic investment have been explained, right? Here, both are needed, welfare and strategic investment. It is not a choice but a synergy. Justice, inclusion, equality of opportunity. Here you will talk about human capital, innovation, productivity and competitiveness, right? Education as a welfare obligation, I have discussed. The state responsibility to ensure equal access and opportunity. Article 21A, free and compulsory education 6 to 14 years. Article 45, Article 46, I have already discussed. Promotes equality, inclusion and social justice for SCs, STs, OBCs, minorities, girls, EWS, PWD and rural people. Breaks cycle of poverty and social exclusion. Builds capabilities and dignity. Now the second point is education as a strategic investment. It builds skilled human capital for productivity and economic growth. It drives innovation, research, entrepreneurship and technology. It enhances global competitiveness in a knowledge-driven world. It transforms demographic dividend into a demographic advantage. High returns for individual economy and society. And what is the false dichotomy? Only welfare or only investment? Education must be both, equitably accessible and globally relevant. If we talk about only welfare, it will neglect quality, skills, innovation and competitiveness. If we'll talk in context with only investment, so the risks are exclusion, commercialization and inequality, right? What is the multiple effects of education? So better health, here, better gender equality, social cohesion, economic growth, environmental sustainability, active citizenship and better health. Challenges and contradictions, quality gaps, commercialization and rising costs, digital divide, employability gap and low investment in research and innovation. This is the challenge. Now what is the way forward? So adequate public investment, okay, universal access with equity and inclusion, focus on foundational learning, teacher quality and accountability, align education with 21st century skills, STEM, digital, critical thinking, vocational skills, strengthen higher education, research and innovation and ecosystem, community participation in decentralized school governance, and global exposure with Indian values, ethics and constitutional morality. And lastly, you can conclude that education is the great equalizer and great multiplier. It is both a welfare obligation that ensures social justice and a strategic investment that builds a knowledge-driven and globally competitive India. Now, if you want to write the answer in introduction, body and conclusion model, you can write answer of this question. Like introduction part, you can write here that education is simultaneously a social right and an investment in human capital, while its welfare role ensures equality of opportunity. Its strategic role determines India's productivity, innovation and global competitiveness. In main body, you can write education as welfare obligation, okay, education as a strategic investment, education as welfare obligation. In this part you can write Article 21 establishes the right to education for children aged 6 to 14. Public education promotes substantive equality by supporting disadvantaged groups. It enables social mobility, women's empowerment and reduction of intergenerational poverty. The capability approach of Amartya Sen views education as expanding substantive freedoms. Education as a strategic investment. Here we can say that it creates skilled human capital for a knowledge economy. It supports innovation, research, entrepreneurship and technological advancement. It converts India's demographic potential into productive workforce. The next here you can write that why the binary is inadequate, because the question was creating a false binary. So you will write that treating education only as welfare can underplay quality, employability and research, while treating it solely as investment can encourage commercialization and exclude disadvantaged groups. ASER 2024 report continued focus on foundational learning demonstrates that access must translate into actual learning outcomes. Suggestions or way forward. India needs adequate public investment plus equitable access plus learning outcomes plus teacher quality plus vocational skills plus digital inclusion plus research funding plus industry academia collaboration. And lastly we'll conclude like therefore the education should be regarded as a welfare with productive returns and investment with social justice objectives. A strong public education system can simultaneously build individual capabilities and India's long-term knowledge and competitive strength. So these are the 4 questions that we had discussed today. Okay, so you can practice writing answer of these questions. Now, based on the today's discussion, what do you observe? What do you analyze? So the today's discussion and these 4 questions, this paper clearly shows that there is a shift from policy programs and scheme based questions to a more analytical, constitutional and governance oriented question on social justice. Questions linked rights with autonomy. Here what we see, questions are linking rights with autonomy, dignity, equity, human development and welfare delivery. What we see, social justice is not only social justice. Now this is a new trend. We are getting topics, themes, questions from constitutionalization of social justice. Like today we discussed Article 21, privacy, dignity, equality and autonomy. They are increasingly integrated into welfare questions. Vulnerable group focus, transgender persons, tribal communities and disadvantaged populations require deeper preparation. Now what we see that the questions are evolving, they are shifting their focus from only schemes to the outcome of the schemes. Today we discussed that how policies actually deliver equity, capability and dignity. Okay, not only features of the policy, but now these are the new changes that do we see. It means that the questions are multi-dimensional interlinkages based. For example, we discussed today malnutrition that was linked with social equity, human development, governance. That is showing that the question is emerging from cross-sectoral areas. We are talking about implementation gaps in the question. We are talking about last mile delivery, convergence, participation, institutional capacity, rights versus governance trade-offs. Okay, so in this way what we see that the questions are completely changed. So whenever we are preparing for 2027 and beyond, we should build every topic through constitution, law, policy, institution, ground level challenges, suggestions, way forward, limitations, challenges. We should prepare vulnerable groups plus human development plus welfare governance all together. We should make notes like this, and we should make notes of most important landmark judgments and constitutional doctrines to use in our answers, right? We should use some examples of current schemes, some credible data, okay, in our answer, so the answers will be multidimensional. So this is the change here. Okay, for example, we discussed to the social justice, the concept of social justice. Okay, so what we see today, lastly I will try to say that the social justice, the questions are not only asking that what the government is doing, but the questions are now asking that does governance actually create dignity, equity and capability. So this is the new change and the new shift and the new focus. So this is the discussion for today. Okay, and today we discussed GS paper 2 social justice questions. Okay, in the next class, in next video I will discuss GS paper 2 any other part like IR, governance or polity and constitution. Okay, so thanks for watching the video, thanks for joining the session. See you in the next video. Thanks to all of you.